250 years old. Why didn't they take over the world before that? America is that old, Peter, and it certainly wasn't a global superpower until, like, the 20th century. The mid-20th century. So what?
So ever since you guys have been created,
like in the head was the cabal going to come take over America, but George Washington was there with a fucking axe, and him and the rest of the founding fathers were going to like literally fuck them up with physical combat. Like, how does he think that this works?
as it's been over, understand the world, and I'm not talking about war. I'm talking about everything.
Let's not go into all the countries the United States has interfered in, or invaded, or done coups in with the CIA, or leaders assassinated. The U.S. is the most attacked nation ever, okay? Can I back that up? No, but I feel it, and my feelings are more important than facts, so...
You know, if I fire with your weapon, then finance or attack everything because of all not more power of the terms of the bank they want.
Oh, my soul!
Take that tactic that will so the original plan was for and I know this is going to be very, very shocking. The original plan was and then they started work, and then you had the vaccine that came out, and much later. So the president here.
No one knew about COVID until 2019. That's why it's called COVID-19. And that's when they discovered it and isolated it as a novel coronavirus. So the 19 stands for. No one knew about it in 2016 year.
Many years for a vaccine, and then during that time the class was destroyed, and then the vaccine was FDA approved.
Here, the middle class has been destroyed over decades since Ronald Reagan because of trickle-down economics. The virus didn't do it. I agree. If anything, the virus just exposed how vulnerable people in the fledgling middle class are at this point. They're barely middle class. They can't go without 2 or 3 paychecks without defaulting on their mortgage. That's not a middle class. That's a working class.
That everyone on earth get the vaccine. Now, that's kind of where I'm kind of stuck with the vaccine word, and basically, strategy by over 7 billion right. They were under different devices by 7 billion. And then obviously there's something more vaccines what you do. Your plan BLM, Antifa, people like me,
How many buzzwords build this video? They're going to target us with BLM and Antifa as vaccination. What? Doesn't mean anything. What do you mean?
We're out again. Speak out. Sending people get jobs. They don't be like they don't support terrorists.
Peter, you live on a compound in a gun cult. How do you think these people are going to get onto the compound?
They're getting out all the
irony is that this is literally Peter's plan, just in the reverse. Peter, maybe people like me don't want to hurt you. We do not want to hurt you. I wish you would get vaccinated. In fact, that's the opposite of wanting to hurt you. I want you and your family to be safe, to get vaccinated, but I don't want to hurt you, and I certainly wouldn't do anything when you're not getting vaccinated. I also don't want to come near you, but like, I'm not going to come near you. It's ironic that instead what you want to do is execute all the people you disagree with. It goes on later in this video, you're like, no, I'm not violent. I just want all these evil people to be executed. When Peter doesn't realize this is all post-war justification for the fact that there are people he politically disagrees with. So that could help the bottom line people who are also in the community, instead of just recognizing that there are people who they disagree with politically, they find it easier to call them all people Satanists and then give them the justification to extrajudicially murder them, even though they don't deserve it and their accusations are false. It's really gross.
So, we were basically going to go this so we have like very small plant by 128 go for 100 million people. This makes like hydrogen, got down to full, and I don't even know what it's up down here would look like. Do you even believe on those? It was this close. Totally don't need it. One more year. 4 years ago. Not just financially, and also back about the value of this and
Either vast majority of the people in the United States are Christian. They're not being persecuted for being Christian.
You know, that receivers have chemical supplies, have years of
Chemtrails aren't real.
We look at everything off, even pharmaceuticals, we have those tests.
I really believe that Peter has literally poisoned himself by making homemade CBD with isopropyl alcohol. That's great business model.
And even suffering, for example, is very complicated. So, pregnant, actually specified for the pregnant middle, all of a sudden. So, not too sure, supplement like
I don't recommend taking supplements like that anyway because they're not well regulated trying to get again.
March by the air, everything in it. And these are attempts trying to get that down.
No wonder Peter deals with so much constant anxiety. He thinks he's being poisoned all day, every day. Jesus Christ. He needs to get help.
That's the inevitable problem. Because, especially financially, people who take this down financially, people will be able to do that. And pretty much no chance of you guys ever coming. So I see comments where they're like, you know what, you're a nice person here. You should talk about your next week. Let me tell you something. The people trying to kill 7 million people, they might hurt that penalty.
Yeah. And they're not, Peter. You conjured up an imaginary slight, an imaginary crime, so you can feel better about murdering innocent people. They are innocent. They are not a cabal. That doesn't exist. The Illuminati doesn't exist. You are targeting people that just happen to disagree with you politically. People like Hillary Clinton. By the way, I don't like either, but I have political differences with her. The difference is I haven't come up with a fantasy that makes it okay for me to murder her. You did. You and people like you have come up with an intricate bullshit lie in order for you to justify yourself murdering countless numbers of your political enemies. That's not okay. It's not real. This is not real, Peter. This is a story you're telling yourself so you can feel better about killing other people. Conspiracy theorists, because they are feeding lies, and they are making you comfortable with the idea of hurting people just by telling lies about them. That's not okay. But courts haven't said that, Peter. Not a single court has said that. Donald Trump took 60-plus lawsuits to the courts, claiming that he lost the election unfairly or via fraud, and all the courts disagreed, including the courts that he appointed the judges to. So you are coming up with fake situations in which it would be morally okay for you to kill your political opponents because you can't win legitimately. That's disgusting. That's what Nazis did. Literally. Please read a history book.
Now,
I can extrapolate on that thought because this one bothers me about QAnon people and a reason I think people need to take them more seriously. The Nazis rose to power on conspiracy theories. We don't often frame it that way, but that's very much the case. The Nazis rose to power off of the idea that the Lügenpresse, the lying press, aka fake news, is hiding and abetting a cabal of people. You know which people, and I'm going to say it because I don't want to get into crazy Semitism. I'm just trying to explain what the Nazis believe. Of course, it's not true. It's conspiracy theory. Believing that certain people, racial groups, religious groups in their society were a secret part of the cabal that was working to undermine the success and prosperity of Germany. This is almost to a T the QAnon conspiracy theory. They've added some stuff about like Satanism and a trend or whatever. But a lot of that stuff here, there's other anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in the past as well. You're doing the same thing, Peter. You're espousing Nazi-level rhetoric in order to kill your political enemies. And here's the thing, I don't think Peter knows this. I don't think Peter is intentionally doing this, but he's one of the people who have fallen for the lie. He's one of the people who heard, Hitler stand on a podium in Berlin saying, we need to bring glory back to the Rhineland, back to Deutschland, and we destroy the subversive elements within our society that are hurting the true German people, air quotes. And Peter's the guy in the audience who's like, yes, I believe that guy. There must be subversive elements that are destroying the country secretly behind the scenes. What are we going to do to stop them? Peter is a useful idiot who's being used by more powerful people and grifters to give people the idea that it's okay to kill political enemies, and they're giving them an excuse by implying that said political enemies are less than human because of certain crimes they are accusing them of that did not in fact happen. History doesn't keep itself in lines. This isn't funny. This shit's serious.
An actual book on Setember and where I talk about taxes for the country and all of it. And I was talking about how we saw the biological weapon that was basically received from that to people. I wrote a book about Setember, so it's not remember follow
I know this is all true because I wrote a fiction book about it a decade ago. Clearly, if I write a fiction book about something, that means it's real. Duh. Idiot. I'll read that again. Again, the fascist rhetoric of the enemy is incredibly weak. They're garbage. They've been around for thousands of years and they haven't been able to take things over. They keep getting close. They're so powerful that they could. They just never do. So we better defeat them once and for all. And all these people happen to be the people I disagree with politically.
All of these aren't people who got to someone that look like everything. Some people got I'm going to say thank God that
Can you imagine how delusional and desperate you have to be in order to listen to Donald Trump speak for more than a minute and think it's anything but a statistical moron? Absolutely bonkers.
So what has happened? Well, this was what happened from spreading almost all of this. Like you're trying to build people.
Yeah, he killed 500,000 people first. Take that, Cabal.
I mean, you're still gonna need that.
Even within his fantasy, hundreds of millions of people die unnecessarily. At least have a nice fantasy in your life.
It's not good. Sometimes the whole conversation of life, of this and the people who want to work that essence, not really
None of that's true, Peter. You want your political enemies slaughtered because you can't win in a legitimate fashion. This is what fascists do. This is what the Nazis did. This is what the Soviet Union did. Stop it. Get some help.
Trying to see the world and watch this and
Don't harass Peter. He's stupid, but don't deserve to get harassed.
that's fine. Trump became president of Israel for modern land, and everything's still going according to his plan. But from a worldwide perspective, everything right now is what happened. So even though I'm talking about what's going on over politics, we also got that says all. So we are a very important part, especially
Not only is Peter important in the sense that he's one of the top 1% of people that's figured out the truth. America is also the most important country in the world at all times, no matter what. Right. Peter, America is even the most Christian country. Why would God be on America's side? It seems like what countries have, besides the Vatican, obviously, what countries are the most Christian? Mexico's probably going to be pretty high on the list. Per capita. Well, Mexico and Central America are much more religious than the United States. So, honestly, God's probably on Mexico's side if we're talking about, America, something South America. Certainly not America.
a lot of people, those people that it's all going to be one plan so far. If you see the world, a lot of plans not being still a bit more regulated, but
If Trump doesn't call his second book The Art of the Steal, he means better people. I just point that out. You call me Art of the Steal. And I don't disagree, I don't rather, sorry, and I don't agree with Trump, and I don't think the election was stolen, but that's such a good title. He's so stupid if he doesn't use it, which means he's probably not going to use it. Call it the Art of the Steal. Someone recommend that.
That's so where we're at now is overall and Trump comes back with all our advantages and well, speed of the ball and all the things that are all around. So we were talking back and you serve a third term.
Very legal, very cool.
As we talk corporation action.
Again, he adopted basically sovereign citizen rhetoric. He'll adopt any conspiratorial belief that allows Donald Trump to become leader for life, basically. So he adopts sovereign citizen rhetoric about the United States being a corporation, but he'll adopt that conspiracy because it plays in this world where he gets to not only kill all political enemies, but courts legally, but he then lets Donald Trump become a dictator for life. Because that's the real Donald Trump's goal. He got a second and then a third term, and he would probably die in the middle of the second term beyond some age, but
And we're into the next game, and next is Trump going to the world votes.
Peter, what about people that just disagree with you politically? Like me, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-universal health care that isn't marijuana. Because all health care is marijuana, it's not. I want people to get free treatments for all the things that get done. I want them to get their needs, et cetera, et cetera. I want rights for LGBT people all around the world. I want leftist values. Am I evil? Do I get killed in this case because I disagree with you politically? Because even people like me, and there's a lot of them, aren't just going to go along with this Trump dictatorship. People like democracy, Peter. You don't get to undo it just because you don't like the state of the country.
Speaking of now, you have a lot of power in the world.
And the vast majority of them are found with one of their guardians or someone close to them. You and I people vote this 800,000 figure because it's outright shocking when you hear initially from 800,000 children go missing a year. Something like over 90% of those cases are non-guardian parents kidnapping their own child. So let's say you get a divorce and you're in custody of your kids, and you're mad about that, you go and take it again. That's a great, that's like a majority of missing children's cases, because parents taking their own kids from an actual guardian. It can also be like an uncle or a sister or something like that. And those situations make up the majority. A small number might be family friends or a teacher or something, and then an infinitesimal amount, which are still tragic, but they're very, very small in their overall number, are the stranger kidnappings. Stereotypical stranger in a van comes and picks up a kid. That's very rare. It doesn't happen very often. Again, that's a tragedy when it happens and it needs to be dealt with. But QAnon people make it sound like it's an epidemic, and it really, really isn't. The vast majority are parents taking their own kids. Over 26% of country, and he just lied and said most of that has become all the Illuminati. No, it's not. It's parents taking their children because they don't have custody, or they might have partial custody, but that's not enough for them, so they want to take their kids and put them somewhere.
You gotta
Hey Peter, how do you feel about the church in Canada and one of their schools finds that huge graveyard, the unmarked graves of indigenous children. Do you also know that one? I'm just curious.
From a product perspective, what's going on in the world? The United States is built up the same that's the same world. All they want to do.
He has seen so many movies.
And that's the second part of the story thing where something buys the acid and supports how so that's very exciting.
He thinks it's going to be like a Tinkerbell moment where Donald Trump is about to be defeated by his state on live TV, and then it's going to be a situation where he and all the other Trump believers just have to clap and say, I believe in Donald Trump. And he'll rise in a battle neck and punch Hillary Clinton in the face or something. 30% of the level of Democrat.
Sample for this.
I have so much bad news about the history of the United States. Oh no. Okay. No. I'm just gonna go with no because I don't have 4 hours to go through. I have America's not a hero. Sorry.
And I know about it.
Oh, it's just really funny. I think most Republicans don't agree with you either. There's a startling amount. I think like a third to 45% of Republicans believe that some part of QAnon. But right now it's not the majority. So just the majority of people who agree with you here, they see it as a
Point is, even if Democrats people all around the world, there's no money. Except maybe not.
No. Peter, really? You think people in other countries were looking at Donald Trump and the majority were like, yeah, we love this? No, oh my, no. Not this one.
This is something that we said, but and destroyed 6,000 this
6,000 years. That predates the idea of the devil. Satan didn't exist as a character 6,000 years ago. What do you mean there were a satanic cult? Satan did not exist as a concept 6,000 years ago. Pipe train, 80% to level 1 in 30 seconds.
this could be the perspective that safe school start looking up a lot of technology everyone around the world knows what I'm doing. All their eyes on it. You know, connected combos, they're like connected wide international conquer and people in our country.
The rest of the world loves when the United States conquers things.
And it's
Remember Vietnam? That was so fun. Yay!
so across this world, we are the same.
I don't even know why I went to Vietnam. I don't know our background is. That's the one everyone firstly brings to shade. The Republicans at this point are like, you know, Vietnam country. 50% the level 2.
And, I don't understand all the things that they can not and my overall help save the world. So, thank you, Trump. And God is connected to me just in time to help me work. So, very, very happy about this. I'm so excited that we went to the point where everything is okay. So, that is basically just the classes once in a while. Everything is United States. And where the United States goes, all eyes are a big deal. This is what happens to the United States. What happens to South.
Someone says international polls show crazy when people trusting Biden over Trump, 95% Biden, 15 for Trump. Yeah, I saw that. He would say that poll is too impressive, or as English people would say, paradisical. You literally use the word that's appropriate for that right now.
So, now on my next episode, we got this far. First off, very excited that we're passing the president signing that is next month. Next month is the Moroccan track. Now, very excited topic. But taking into account, as I answered that one that episode, we were talking about it, especially by starting very.
Is this going to include hardcore alien penetration? Because I'm on board.
Because we all of the West. That's the reality of it.
AKA Calibrium account that says they're suggesting, well, a fictional organization that doesn't exist.
Everyone exactly the next episode, right? The higher perspective. Use that because that's the higher perspective that I can show you. The more accurate and the moral perspective. So, again, I would do and chance that fast all the Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. And I really appreciate donating and supporting. And I appreciate the people who have been doing and checking out the company that was meant to love and message products. And they are not going to I watch it. I try to buy those positive. So, those are the products that we check out.
They're overpriced, please don't. So here's the bad news. Alright. I hope he's okay. Again, I think Peter's, like I said, kind of a useful medium. He's kind of right-wing people who are trying to convince people like that it's okay to kill their political enemies by breaking as if their political enemies are these evil child kidnapping Satanists, which is the case. Either way, he doesn't get help like second million. Maybe you just it's okay. I don't want to trees to move on. So that's here. That is some good messages while we finish off this fifth train. 2 minutes left, and then I'm probably calling that that's going to go in Jake. And Randy is supposed to get here tonight for the sixth finale.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
They are unanimous in my victory, and I welcome their victory.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. So Uncharted report with Sam Cedar.
It is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Kiwanis and now in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Patrick Radin, author of Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. Also on the program today, Buffalo gets its first socialist mayor. And first female mayor. Meanwhile, in New York City, mayoral race still extant. Adams in the lead in the first round. Remember, this is ranked choice. Tiffany Kavan, TSA. Remember, they have won for a city council race. We're waiting a while on these things.
Mas ainda bem que não diz que assim
Joey Wrightsville.
Espera aí. Foste meu Vicente?
Democrats held. Supreme Court crushes the union's right to organize agricultural workers. And the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which we thought we were going to hear about yesterday, is looking like it is still going. Delta variant now makes up 20% of U.S. COVID cases. Bernie Sanders shows a little give on the SALT cap as he fashions the infrastructure reconciliation bill. Senate reconciliation bill may include the path to citizenship for immigrants. DOJ announced its initiative to crack down on interstate gun sales. Lastly, headed by on FTC. Purchase of MGM. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. It is Wednesday. It's here, like it is. Virtually, certainly, as I already anticipated. Your upcoming vacation.
Yes.
More than a week away.
No, it's literally a week from today.
Well,
So, right. I mean, you got to cherish me while you can.
I think we do that every
Not enough.
Well, I'm sorry about that. We all thanks for joining us today, folks. We're going to get to a little bit later in the program the implications of what we saw with the voting rights of the working class. That was filibustered by Republicans. There is no good news in terms of the For the People Act. There is some good news for the potential of some voting protection reforms. Not so great news when it comes to voter IDs. And some potentially good news, potentially, in terms of filibuster. And we'll talk more about that later in the program. However, yesterday was the New York Democratic primary day, and there were some surprises across New York City. In New York City, in some ways, no surprise. I guess the biggest surprise in New York City was that the force that people refer to as end again did not do so well. In fact, now understand, this is there is no winner yet. As of this morning, Eric Adams had about 32%. He is the Brooklyn Borough president, and former police officer Maya Wiley, former member of the Bill de Blasio administration, former prosecutor, MSNBC, former MSNBC commentator, 23%. Catherine Garcia, 20%, and Andrew Yang, about 12%. If you can get over 50% to avoid sort of the kicking in of ranked choice voting, the difference between Adams and Wiley suggests that it is very difficult for her to make up that distance in ranked choice. And it's also, I hear it, like it could be possible that we're not going to hear anything on this race for 2 or 3 weeks.
But as you say, though, I mean, the results seem fairly clear. We don't know anything definitively, but Adams has what most experts believe is a fairly insurmountable lead at this point, which is bad news. I saw people comparing it to, the left in Bernie's campaign, where the left was so preoccupied with Pete Buttigieg or whoever the case may be, Kamala Harris, and then when it was Biden all along, at the stronghold, and that's kind of where Eric Adams is.
Yes, and to be clear, as I'm listing off those 4 names at the top, there's only one who has been a ongoing politician, who has had 10, 20, 30 years build an organization and develop relationships, most recently Brooklyn Borough president. But the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that there's going to be attempts to extract from this outcome as to ideology. And the fact that Maya Wiley was not the first choice of progressives. There were multiple candidates that were ahead of her, but lost their mojo, as it were, because Scott Stringer had some accusations of potential sexual harassment 20 or 30 years ago, and the extended deceit was largely abandoned. Morales had her own problems. Campaign workers essentially union. And so Maya Wiley was a late settle for progressives. Your mileage may vary as leaders, but and Bernie at 22, 23% is a pretty strong show relative to the 32% that a guy who has his own machine theoretically did. So to extrapolate Eric Adams is tough on crime, Maya Wiley is not tough on crime, and to suggest that played a big issue in this election, I think is silly. And we only need to look to Buffalo, New York, which has had a fairly significant rise in crime over the course of essentially the pandemic, and see that whatever lesson that you draw from the New York City mayoral race is not one that you can learn in the Democratic primary. Not one that you can apply other places necessarily. You know, maybe that narrative is just not true. Here is the socialist India, Walton, declaring victory of the bomb.
All that we are doing in this moment is claiming what is rightfully ours. We are the workers. We do the work. And we deserve a government that works with and for us.
And what she's saying, she a four-term incumbent mayor. Obviously, this is a Democratic primary, but
And all that secures her place is, most likely the mayor in the fall. I mean, some of the things that she promised, signing a tenants' bill of rights, rent control, removing police from mental health calls, all just, important policy changes that she could do fairly immediately. These are her first 100-day promises.
and here she is, and she considers herself a socialist, and so there's no backing away for India Walton.
Oh, absolutely. The entire intent of this campaign is to draw down power and resources to the ground level and to the hands of the people. And when we think about socialism, we're perfectly fine with socialism for the rich. We will ban out Wall Street and give $1 billion in tax incentives to one of the richest people in the world to build empty Tesla factories in South Buffalo. And when it comes to providing the resources that working families need to thrive, I'm scared at that point. So I'm very proud to be a Democratic socialist. I am proud to have the support of Buffalo PSA and National PSA. I received a call from Congresswoman AOC, and I'm just excited to be a part of this movement that is ushering progressive politics into Buffalo. Being the third fourth municipality in the country, you should be considering how we begin to eradicate concentrated poverty and disadvantage. And Democratic social leanings are a big step in getting there.
It's going to be fun to see those policies enact.
Yeah, and just for strength. And, I saw on Twitter too that Martin Pacino, the old man who was assaulted by Buffalo police, pushed down by them during, police accountability protests. He was at the victory party. So, just kind of full circle in terms of the way Buffalo's been in the news recently and what grassroots campaigns can accomplish.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Patrick, the author of Empire Pain, Secret History, Secular Latin, right back after these words. Here are these words, today's program. Got a couple of sponsors today. You've heard me talk about Quick. You've heard me talk about Quick. Too much. Really good sports center. But I got, it's not good. It's about 2 or 3 years, 3 years ago, I got very hyper conscious about dental hygiene because it's my age, I realize that it's on the way. And you can't go backwards. You gotta get something that is now. How do you maintain good or oral dental hygiene? Develop habits that are easy, that are comfortable. How do you do that? With utensils that are designed well, function well. But electric toothbrush, just that. It's easiest electric toothbrush, dealing food, and their whole system of sending food brush heads every 3 months makes it super easy. Well, they have extended that, process to mouthwash. Mouthwash has not changed in 40 years. But Quip has created a mouthwash that gives you more than the ingredients you need. That comes in an eco-friendly refill bottle. It's 100% recyclable. There's no alcohol in their mouthwash. No fat pressure. Help prevent cavities. It's feel fresh. They're 4 times concentrated as chloride, xylitol, and CBC. And they left out the artificial color, and like I said, they left out alcohol. What happens is you get a customizable subscription that refills automatically delivered straight to your door every 3 months. Which refill bottles are made from 100% recyclable plastic. Mouthwash is the perfect finishing touch to their oral care routine. Pair it with an electric toothbrush. My kids and I have equipped use their refillable flossers. I still am amazed with every time I use this every day. They have this great gum that I talked about that with a little Pepsi sensor. And I should also mention that you can get a watermelon toothpaste that my kids can love. So check it out. Go to getquip.com/majority5. Right now, you get $5 off a mouthwash starter kit. That's $5 off a mouthwash starter kit with your refillable dispenser and a 90-day supply with 4 times concentrated formula at getquip.com/majority5. That's U-O-5. GetQuip.com/majority5. Which is good habits hunger. Also, is that his favorite admin company? Yeah. It's television. Modern today. You don't want swamp ass, folks. Summertime, cut down. You don't want swamp ass. Hello, Tish. The 3.0 modern today. Stylish, eco-friendly, is super easy to install. All you do is take off your toilet seat, which involves you screw like this. You don't need anything next to electricity. You don't need anything right into your just think about the precisely water itself, smart spray automatic nozzle. Attaches to your existing toilet, like I said, pays for itself in a few months. Down on your toilet bill just by 80%. And frankly, it is the most civilized way. Deal with this issue that we all have. I mean, the issue is 2.1. And now let's stop. Plus, however,
I'm not doing anything.
The last cover is 60-day risk-free guarantee and 12-month warranty. You already got a Hello Tushy? Well, keep your butt if you want If you're new to the revolution, understand you could become an evangelist afterwards. Once you go for day, you don't go back. You don't go for back. You don't go for back. That's right. Honestly, folks, you really need revelation. Why people around the world they do it this way. It just doesn't make sense. Get dirt on your hand, you have to take a dry piece of paper and wipe it off. Water. Repeat swamp ass. Go to hellotushy.com/Jordan to get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our listeners. At hellotushy.com/Jordan, 10% off. hellotushy.com/Jordan. Check it out, folks. Honestly, it's a lot less expensive than you would think to try this out. Lastly, when we talk about hunting killer, it basically one of those key things that made the lockdown, frankly, tolerable. It is the murder mystery subscription box. It's the most exciting thing I could have at home. For me, it was also the only way that I could get my teenage daughter to eat it. She's basically done with every. I thought maybe I got through it. It's got ramped up. But
Well, I thought you were big on TikTok with this whole
I'm very excited about TikTok, what's going on with that. But this was one of the few things that we were able to do as really a couple of years, where she was totally into it. She mentioned that she was really into that, all those
Law and Order,
Law and
SVU,
Order.
that kind of stuff.
And so I asked her, she was like, this, we did one, I can't remember the name of it. Then we did Curtain Call, which was Matt, I think, did this with his girlfriend, too. It was go back in 1930, somebody in real time found like a body, find out it was great. Brings people together, challenge them to code ciphers, to solve puzzles. What you get is each time they send you every month an update, basically a box with documents, evidence, audio recordings, case files, and you go through it. Just that eliminate suspects, under weapons, crack the case, case the killer. So, person, mix it up. Some people person, some people want to, doesn't matter. But also try not to go to spoiler free online community. There are thousands of members there that will help you include what these out there to get to them. Unskiller has 100,000 active subscribers with 2,000 5-star reviews. It's basically like I don't know, it's like a indie production. It's almost like big pieces, but you're actually in it. Part of the proceeds, very box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, is an organization dedicated to helping people like cold cases. Check it out. Great gift for Valentine's. Father's Day. Yes, whatever. Over the summer.
Happy July 4th.
It's Hunter Killer. Right now, you go to hunterkiller.com/promo code Jordan, 20% off your first box. Again, make sure you use the Jordan for 20% discount. Check that out, folks. I have no idea. I didn't know it. It's not exactly what it is. All right, let's welcome to the program, Patrick Gallery. Is a staff writer and New Yorker, author of multiple books. His latest, The Empire of Pain, Secret History, Staff Writer Dynasty. Patrick, I'm here with Emma. Thanks so much for joining.
Great community.
Let's just start. And I think this audience over the years has heard me at multiple important conferences talking about the development of some of the cases against exactly around the country to the impact of essentially what the Sacklers have brought to the pharmacy. But some of course, broad strokes, the implications of what the Sacklers developed and marketed on this country over the past months
Was really mostly familiar to people until quite recently as a name that stood for philanthropy. This was a family that gave hundreds of millions of dollars away over the decades to art museums, to universities, to medical facilities. What was less well known is that a big part of the family as well had been generated by the marketing and sale of OxyContin. It's a very powerful painkiller. And as you say, the opioid crisis is this very complex crisis that's unfolded over 25 years. But OxyContin was, in the words of one former employee of the Sacklers company, Purdue Pharma, the tip of the spear. It was really the drug, this powerful opioid painkiller that changed the way in which American doctors prescribed these drugs. And there was a lot of marketing, which turned out to have been deceptive, claiming that opioids should be more widely prescribed because they're not addictive. And this turns out not to be true. And so that was the role that OxyContin played, and it was very, very profitable strategy for the Sacklers.
this single drug has generated about $35 billion in revenue since it was released in 1996, but also a really devastating war to the United States.
And we should say, that by tip of the spear, people are familiar, I guess, with the idea that a gateway drug. Gateway is not even, I think, it's not even accurate in this instance. It's more like a funnel, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of gravity involved in this, that it's not just opening the door to other drugs, it was really funneling people into drugs. We've had 500,000 people die of ODs. They're not responsible. I don't know how to parse out the responsibility of that to specifically what number, but this is an extraordinary amount. And obviously, on top of that, those are ODs. You have a tremendous amount of addiction that has become that is burdened municipalities, counties, states, families, and the implications of this are massive. Particularly when you sort of look at this past year of COVID and say, this is what it looks like when 600,000 people die in the implications involved around this. This has been massive. So let's first, because there's been much written over the past couple of years about second, talk about how you reported this book. When Dawn, where sort of the initial round of reporting was on this, because of the legal cases, and we also obviously spoke to a lot of people. Tell us about that, and then also from prior history, the working with the illicit drug dealing, how that sort of a couple of red flags went off because of that. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to take the second part first, I had written over the years about the illegal drug trade. I've been really fascinated by the ways in which particularly Mexican drug cartels operate as businesses, the ways in which they're big criminal enterprises, but they're also big multinational commodity businesses. And I was interested in how they make determinations about what do they deal in, how far do they go, how much do they vertically integrate, all these types of questions. And one thing that I was puzzled by was that after 2010, we suddenly saw a surge in Mexican heroin coming across the border. And I was just wondering what would account for that. And it goes to what we just mentioned, that idea of the gateway or the funnel. So it turned out that you had a huge population of people in this country who didn't start out using heroin. They started on prescription pills like OxyContin, and then eventually graduated to heroin, which is chemically quite similar in terms of both being opioids. And that led me to the Sackler family. So I initially wrote a piece about the Sacklers in 2017 for the New Yorker, and it was one of these funny things where they, I was not breaking the news that Purdue Pharma was owned by this family. That had been out there in the world, but it had been a story that the family had managed to contain, I think, in a really impressive way. And so, certainly in 2017, when I started working on this, museums were still taking their donations. There was no sense that the family name had been tainted by any association with the opioid crisis. That started to change over the last few years, and some of it was that there was more press coverage. I certainly, in my piece, tried to not tell a kind of broad story about the opioid crisis where the Sacklers were one strand of the corner, but really focused closely on the family and their accountability. But you also saw states which had sued Purdue Pharma. At this point, pretty much every state in the union was suing Purdue. But some states, starting with Massachusetts, started to also sue individual members of the Sackler family. And then you got activism by people like the photographer Ned Golden, and so more and more attention started converging on the family. And as that happened, you start getting more documents which had previously been secret coming out, so that would go through litigation when they were producing litigation, and anybody could access them. And as I got into my reporting, I also had people leaking things to me, because it was important for me that if you're going to tell the story of this billionaire family who wouldn't speak to me, they were trying to sue me since I started working. I didn't want it to feel like we were looking at through a telescope. I wanted some sense of intimacy. And so it's helpful to have their own private emails and know the way they talk about this crisis behind those doors.
How integral was the Bush era DOJ settlement to kind of keeping a lid on the Purdue family's complicity in this rising crisis? Because I mean, it's fairly laughable when you look at the figures that they settled for, and it obviously, as you say, it didn't gain traction in the way that we're seeing it now until a few years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such an important point. So on the one hand, I'm focusing very closely on this family in the book and their culpability. On the other hand, this is a story about systemic failure, just totally widespread systemic failure, instances in which all of the relevant public institutional gatekeepers that are supposed to prevent a public health crisis like this from happening didn't do their jobs. And DOJ is right at the front of the line there, because what happened was in 2007, as you said, you had a U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Virginia that had spent 5 years investigating Purdue and investigating the Sacklers, and wanted to bring a really powerful case against them, thought they had a powerful case against the company. What they wanted to do was charge 3 senior executives of the company with felonies, and then the plan was, as is often the case, if you did that, at least one of them would flip and turn on the Sacklers, and then they would go on and potentially prosecute the Sacklers themselves, who owned it and controlled the company. But what happened was, at the 11th hour, the family and the company sent some of their well-connected fixers from both sides of the aisle. So they had Giuliani on one hand, but also Mary Jo White, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, who would become the head of the FCC under Obama. The two of them appealed to the political leadership of the George W. Bush Justice Department, and essentially defanged this case. What happened was that the brass said to the U.S. Attorney in Western District of Virginia, "We're not charging these guys with felonies." So at the point where those guys are just misdemeanors, there's no jail time, there's no way they're going to turn on the Sacklers. And so what you ended up with was a penalty by the company, and then a $600 million fine, which to one way of looking at it is a lot of money, but I can tell you, I interviewed somebody who worked with the company who saw the company's CFO say, "That's nothing to us. We've had that money in the bank for years." This was a speeding ticket. It was a fine at a time when the company was making billions of dollars a year.
It's culturally like I have a delivery truck and I get parking ticket now. And it's part of the cost of the business. So let's go back. The first third or so of the book is dedicated to a guy who wasn't even alive when this happened, but he, Arthur Sackler, was, I guess, innovative. It's hard to use that word as a role, but he essentially developed and conceived the concept of medicine as an entrepreneurial exercise. And tell us about Arthur Sackler and about that dynamic, where he basically, turned medicine into a full-on product.
Yeah, I think this was certainly the biggest creative choice in writing the book, was that, as you say, focus a third of the book on a guy who died before the introduction of OxyContin. But I think Arthur Sackler was a sufficiently important figure that the decision is justified. It's not just the dude with the wacky uncle who there are great stories about. For me, it was really more that you can see in Arthur Sackler's story, in embryo, everything that happens later with OxyContin. So, originally there were 3 Sackler brothers. Arthur's the oldest. His younger brothers are Mortimer and Raymond. They grow up the children of Jewish immigrants in Brooklyn. They grew up against the backdrop of the Great Depression. And all 3 of them go on to become doctors. But they were also very entrepreneurial. And Arthur, in particular, had, I think, a kind of idealistic sense in the 40s and 50s that there were amazing things happening in the pharmaceutical industry that someday there'd be a pill that fix every human affliction, and he wanted to be there for it and to make money in the process. And so he goes into pharmaceutical advertising, which at the time was kind of a backwater. But Arthur had this sort of Don Draper style intuition about how you sell things to people, and specifically, how you sell things not just to consumers but to doctors. You realize that what you really need
need to do is persuade the doctor, because the doctor has a prescription pad, and that's incredibly valuable to a pharma company. And so he employs a whole bunch of tricks. Some of it is just getting an army of pharmaceutical reps to go out and meet the doctors and pharmacists and nurses and make the case. They always have this kind of official-looking medical literature, which is often been underwritten by the pharma companies themselves. They're always overplaying the therapeutic benefits of the drug, underplaying the downsides, and in some cases, when our group was working, just lying outright about their products and who it is that's endorsing them. And so Arthur devised this model with the guy who was a business partner of his back in the 50s who said, when it comes to medical advertising, Arthur Sackler invented the idea that he was really that significant in terms of changing the way in which medicine and commerce from Google in this country. And so he does die in 1987, but having made a huge fortune marketing Valley. This is one of the things that's so fascinating. The first great Sackler fortune came from marketing Valley in the 1960s. And I think that Arthur really created a playbook that his family, his brothers, his nephew Richard, would then employ to devastating effect from the OxyContin.
And ultimately, I guess I feel like it was maybe the past decade where there were more restrictions on the ability of sales agents in their relationships with doctors. But that is when you see that, I guess the flow of in the case of OxyContin, the doctors, and assuming the vast majority of them are scrupulous, there's some that were problematic, specifically with criminal in some respects. For the most part, they don't have the bandwidth to assess what a sales agent from a place is telling them, and they don't have necessarily the bandwidth of reading all the studies about every single drug they have. Us as patients just presume that our doctors should know, right? I mean, that's like one of the key breakdowns in the system. There's another on the distributor side, we like the test, cardinal, and whatnot. But that seems to be one of the key breakdowns in what happened.
That's exactly right. You put your finger on it. I mean, I think from childhood, right, we grow up with this sense of doctors as like rabbis or priests, that they're kind of unimpeachable, that they have our best interests in mind, that they provide an oath, and there's a sort of intimacy to that relationship in which I think a lot of us have an almost childlike relationship to our physicians, with the sense that I don't know enough to know what this constellation of symptoms indicates to the future, and I'm putting my health in your hands, and I will take your guidance. And I think that that starts with Dr. Sackler, and now there's obviously a huge juggernaut of an industry doing this, just creating a wedge between the patient and the physician, where industry can come in and influence those decisions. And one of the things that was astonishing to me as I got into the marketing of OxyContin is just how varied it is. As you say, I mean, there are bad doctors, there are crooks who run pill mills, and they know very well that they're writing medically unnecessary prescriptions and maybe getting kickbacks for it. But there are also a lot of well-meaning doctors who see a patient in pain, they want to relieve that pain, and suddenly there's a solution that they're told has no real downsides. The company would say that OxyContin is the drug to start with and to stay with. Because essentially you can use it indefinitely with no real side effects. You don't have to worry about addiction, and you can ease terrible pain. And then in between, you have this whole arsenal of persuasive techniques. So in many instances, what this would entail would be the company sponsored thousands of pain management seminars, and the idea is, this is education, really. So you say to a physician, listen, you're not taking pain seriously enough, what do you think about an all-effective trip over the tongue, down for treatment, we'll have some nice entertainment, and you can listen to some talks about how best to manage pain, and the whole thing is underwritten by this company that has this painkiller. If you talk to physicians, often they'll tell you that they
they're sort of aware of the motivations of big pharma, but they'll also say, oh, but I'm not influenced by it. It's like people, they watch the Super Bowl commercials and they say, oh, it's entertaining. But of course, I've never changed my consumer behavior. And it's funny because this is just not true, right? So it turns out there's studies on this. If you buy a needle for as little as $15 for a doctor, you can change the way that they prescribe. And Purdue Pharma, some years, was spending up to $9 million a year just to buy food for doctors.
I want to put a flag in that because we'll come back to it. We'll talk about developing a copy of the coding that starts with MS. Because we work our way up to where doctors really do not understand what OxyContin was relative to what the MS Contin was, and in terms of its strength. And the two was aware of that dynamic. But let's start with the development of MS Contin, which is I guess the first innovation that we treated.
Yeah, absolutely. So Purdue Pharma, this company that the Sacklers owned, originally the family bought it in 1952. It was an old pharmaceutical company called Purdue Frederick, which started in Greenwich Village in the end of the 19th century. And Arthur Sackler basically buys it for his brothers, and for decades it trades in these pretty unglamorous products. I mean, they had a laxative, they had a wax remover, it's these kind of over-the-counter staples, but not very innovative products. But eventually they do start to do their own R&D, and they come up with this cancer drug called MS Contin. The idea was that this is a morphine pill, but with a special seal that allowed the morphine to slowly disperse into the bloodstream over a number of hours. And so the content is sort of continuous. And MS Contin was basically just pure morphine, but you could take it. And what this meant was that people who had terrible cancer pain or were in a life situation could be at home, that they didn't need to be in the hospital or dose morphine. They could just take these pills. And MS Contin was a big success for the company, totally out of proportion to anything intended for. But as we know, when the success in the pharmaceutical business is all about the patent. And the premium that you can charge when you have an exclusive patent to produce the drug, and eventually the patent for MS Contin was running out. And so the company was kind of casting around looking for other painkillers that they could sell with this content system. And they landed on oxycodone, which is another opioid very powerful, been around for the better part of a century. And so the idea was to took a big dose of oxycodone and this content seal, which you come up with a really powerful painkiller called OxyContin. The strange thing about this is that when they're looking into it, they realize that doctors and focus groups have the misapprehension that oxycodone is weaker than morphine, when in fact it's not twice as strong. So there are these amazing emails that I got my hands on where senior people at the company, including Richard Sackler, have these discussions about this oddity that the doctors seem to misunderstand the product that Purdue is now selling, like MS Contin, OxyContin, and doctors think that oxycodone is weaker than morphine when the opposite is true. And in these emails, what they say is, let's not do anything to make those doctors realize they had it wrong. Let's let them continue to believe that the stronger drug is the weaker drug. And the reason they wanted to do that was they weren't satisfied with the cancer pain market. They thought, what if we position OxyContin as a drug for everyone, for tens of millions of people who suffer from chronic, non-malignant pain of various sorts. That's the market we want. And so if doctors think that it's actually a milder treatment and not a stronger one, they'll be more likely to prescribe it for that kind of thing.
We could substitute, in other words, that's the thing, more stronger and not stronger. So you let doctors prescribe it in more addictive substance for, like you say, ailments that were not
not like potentially terminal. They're doing it for chronic back pain. And so this ends up being really the sort of the is creating this mass addiction, right? Is that doctors prescribing something they think is less addictive, and so therefore they also feel comfortable with prescribing it for situations that are not acute. And it has obviously become a massive disaster.
Yeah, and not just less addictive, but not addictive at all. I mean, the whole marketing push for OxyContin. First of all, I should say, the company didn't do any tests on addictiveness prior to releasing the drug, even though he was known for thousands of years that products derived from the opium, coffee, can be quite addictive. But they had this kind of, I think what we could generously call a conjecture, which was that because of that content coding, that what that would mean is that the drug was kind of sort of regulated the flow of the drug into the bloodstream, and you wouldn't have these highs and lows where you get a kind of immediate dose and some euphoria associated with that, followed by the kind of valley of withdrawal when you don't have the drug in your system. And so they had this guess, basically, which they said, well, maybe that means it's not addictive at all. And they ran with that guess, essentially claiming that it was a scientific condition, and told thousands of doctors across the country and hundreds of sales reps. I interviewed people. They said we would go in and say that it was less than 1% of the time. With a straight face, look in the eye and say, you don't even worry about that, and stick with less than 1% of the time. They would repeat that again and again and again. There's no scientific basis for making that claim.
This is support failure of the FDA and branches of what we have with drugs is obviously, I find it hard to believe that they wasn't aware. But it is one of those things that we still want to know about the addiction. But they also did an end around that go back with MS-COM that is reminiscent of what we see almost with the Cooper in some way. They came in and busted through the regime and basically created facts on the ground and then go back. You just tell that story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So MS-COM was actually developed in the UK, and it was sold there initially, and then they were going to roll it out in the US. And normally, if you have a new drug, the rules are pretty clear. You need to file what's called a new drug application with the FDA, and again, there's an approval process. We can talk about how thorough and precise that process is, but there is a process. It's a bureaucratic process. It takes some time, and then the FDA eventually says, all right, you're approved to sell this to U.S. consumer. What happened with MS-COM was that a canny lawyer who subsequently pled guilty to a federal misdemeanor at Purdue said, what if we just sold it on the assumption that because it's morphine, the only active ingredient is morphine, and morphine has been around for a long time, it's already been approved. We don't need to file a new drug application, it's really not that new. So you have this kind of funny thing where on the one hand, internally, they all say, oh, this is a groundbreaking drug, it's a game changer. We give this pat on the back because we've revolutionized the management of pain. But then for regulatory purposes, they say, oh, this is really just morphine. It's just morphine with this content coding. So they just sold it. They just started selling the drug. And by the time the FDA caught on to this and sent them a cease and desist letter and said, listen, litigation, there were already a lot of patients who were relying on the drug. There's people with cancer who were relying on it for pain. And so you end up in this kind of negotiated situation where the company sends all its lawyers down they prevail on at the time of the Reagan administration. To let them keep selling it and then retroactively apply for the new drug application for this drug that is already on the market, which is what they ended up doing.
I feel like we could probably just an hour on the FDA process. This is the way this is also now other drugs. They will get approval for one treatment. They will do off-label treatments for these drugs, which presumably the drug is safe, but how you apply the drug and how you market it. That's basically what marketing is, right? And marketing is essentially directions for use of the drug.
It's going to the doctor, it's applied, the doctor thinks, well, if we're doing this, then it's exactly what trust me, take it 3 times a day or whatever it is you take for this ailment. And this is where we run into all sorts of problems with drugs because it's constantly these pharmaceutical companies trying to find ways in which they're going to sort of repurpose drugs that have gotten approved for one application. They're going to use it for a different application so they can expand their market exactly.
Absolutely, and it's funny. So when you get a bottle of pills from the pharmacist with that little packet with the that's fine print inside, you probably don't read. It's called a packet insert, and it is a very carefully negotiated document with a lot of drafting back and forth between the company and the FDA. Richard Sacklin, for a time, was running for the pharma and really sort of the father of OxyContin. He described a package insert at one point for OxyContin as our most potent selling instrument, right? So for him, this is a marketing document. And in terms of the FDA and how much stock we should put in their ability to be judicious when it comes to playing their role as regulator, I think it's instructive to look at the approval of OxyContin later. So after OxyContin, retroactively, that it's a drug application approved, they want to roll out OxyContin and they apply for approval of the drug application. There's a guy named Curtis Wright, who's the head official at FDA in charge of policing those products. He's the guy that they need to satisfy both that the drug is safe and efficacious for U.S. consumers, but also he needs to sign off on the marketing claims, which are in some cases that turn out to be pretty outlandish. So Curtis Wright signs off on a drug breezes through in record time. It's less than a year, gets approved. Curtis Wright leaves the FDA, and within a year, he goes to work for pharma for 3 times his second salary. So that's not a suitcase full of money getting passed under the table, but I think it's not correct on some level.
One other example of somebody that worked on one side of the regulatory scheme and ended up working for the community. That's also, I want to get to, not too much time, I want to get to some of the sort of the horror of this family that's into the lack of empathy. She said, those the heirs of the harvest after, but when they sold it to Reagan and Morgan, some of the Sackler family was like, we were never part of that. And they referred to it as the Oxy Sackler. And Mortimer apparently at one point was questioned whether it was the opioid crisis. Tell the story about, I think just which story from the book you think exemplifies their lack of empathy and failure to accept responsibility. It's stunning. But then I want to ask you about the sort of structural.
Yeah. For me, it was interesting, right? Like, it was just big book on family and nothing would cooperate with me. And it was interesting. So for a long time, I thought there must be some apostate. There must be some family member, some third generation Sackler who's uncomfortable about all this idea of money and has questions about what they've done. It turned out there really isn't. And I ended up getting hold of a lot of internal family WhatsApp log that ran over a year. And what's so striking is that internally they all have this kind of bunker mentality, this sense that, so every single year they say that they have to stay for students family. Congress has held hearings, we have books, we've got research studies, we've got journalistic accounts, thousands of lawsuits, I guess, there's like 3,000 lawsuits. I think a pretty broad, uniform consensus that this company and this family played a special role. They weren't the only ones, but they played a special role in sparking the opioid crisis. Inside the family, their perspective is, which is understood. All those people are wrong.
we in our small circle of paid advisors have seen the truth, which is that we really never did anything wrong. As we say, Mortimer Zappa referred to it as the so-called opioid crisis. They put a lot of emphasis on the idea that today it's a heroin and fentanyl crisis, even though it's very, very clear that many people who have started using heroin and fentanyl started out with prescription pills. So I think I was most struck actually by, the dog with the farm. I was most struck by the absence of any family member typing up and saying, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this. And you end up with these kind of, I had multiple different people who I interviewed for this athlete for them say that the experience with like being on the show Succession, it's this sort of the experience of like this kind of totally out of touch billionaire family. So there are these moments in the book where the family has taken all the money out of the pharma, so there's no money left in the company, and they're going to go bankruptcy, and they're looking to come up with a deal to settle all these cases by the states. And it's like a couple of days later, Josh Sackler, the wife of the third generation, David Sackler, has a fashion show, a New York Fashion Week, because she had this like vanity fashion line, and just the kind of tone deafness of this, right? And she, they offered $100,000 to Courtney Love to come and sit in the front row. And Courtney Love came back and said, I was addicted to OxyContin myself. Are you nuts? And, how can you ask me to do this? So there are these kind of absurd moments where you see, on the one hand, the sheer toll of human devastation, and on the other hand, just how out of touch this family has become.
So, I mean, like you described in this Succession, that sounds like Real Housewives to me, right? With a little bit of the vanity projects in the New York socialite scene. How much money did they run away with? I mean, we know, I guess, the scale of the amount of states that are going after them now, but how wealthy are they still to this day, individually?
So we don't know the exact number. There are a lot of people trying to find out the precise dimensions of the fortune, but I can tell you the numbers that have been confirmed through the bankruptcy process. So before the bank had gotten up and saying, this amazing thing happens, which is that the company actually pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges twice, once in 2007 and then again in 2020. And in between, the family is quietly taking money out of the company. So at a certain point, the company declares bankruptcy. There's all these lawsuits, and Purdue Pharma just doesn't have any money anymore to fight the lawsuits. But the reason it doesn't have any money is the family has taken, we know, this has been basically established, more than $10 billion out of the company in about a decade. So you now end up in this crazy place where you have a company that's in bankruptcy for the White Plains, and all these thousands of creditors kind of fighting over the scraps of what's left of the company. And then on the sidelines, this family, this fortune is estimated to be at about $11 billion, at least $11 billion. That's sort of what the Mortimer and the Raymond Wings have now. They have offered to pay, they will acknowledge no wrongdoing, they want to make these cases go away. They've offered to pay about $4.25 billion, which, again, it all depends on which end of the telescope you're looking through. On the one hand, that's a lot of money, and it's significant money. On the other hand, it's 40 cents on the dollar for what they took out of the company over the course of the decade. How much do you think this is a story of a unique family? Manipulating the system, or a system, and that system, I don't know, you can define the parameters of that, just whether it's just the FDA or frankly, like, the way that we do medicine in this country. And if we had a single payer system that would, or a government that would actually produce these drugs, or, where there wasn't this kind of off-coded, it wouldn't matter. You had Harvard Sacklers or Mortimer Sacklers running around because they don't have the opportunity to design an act. How much of this is a function of the family, or how much of a function of the structure of capitalism, or the way that maybe a smaller structure of capitalism? I think it's both. I mean, I think that it's very much a story about the system and the failures of the regulatory system, the failure of the justice system. We haven't even gotten into that because of the DEA, failure of Congress. I mean, you can go on. Every conceivable check that should be there protecting consumers failed and often I think was bought off with money and connections. At the same time, the family, this particular family, I think played that system like a heart. And so for me, it's one of those things where we were to sit around in civics class and talk about the weaknesses of the system that we have, and play it out almost as a hypothetical, right? Like, well, what was the worst case scenario that could be? How could somebody manipulate this system to advantage of all of its weaknesses and use money to co-opt people at every single level? How bad could it get? And I think the answer is a public health crisis in which you have more than 2 million Americans addicted to opioids and another 500,000 Americans dead, and a family that is basically going to waltz off into the sunset with a $10+ billion fortune intact.
Lastly, just here, I wonder how much do you think it seems so good seeing that thinking about that time while one of the factors for doing it is part of my kids. I don't understand how hard this is on us. There's so many things like when I said to the man over for going to the van. I got a woman when she was holding a protest or just like the New Yorker, right? The New Yorker is different than like being in like, I don't know, USA Today, because they're walking around in circles where people are in New York. It's embarrassing. How much that like?
I think it's a real thing. I mean, I would be lying if I said that wasn't a consideration for me when I wrote the article in the New Yorker. I New Yorkers is men in the kinds of places where they, his family resides and circulates, and I've enjoyed. I think it was real. People kind of, they're not knowing about what they've been up to or pretending about that. I think there's a reputational cost. I think it's real. I think the name is coming down for institutions. How bad it comes down from that at a certain point in the near future. I think that's about as bad as it's going to get for them. And so, next to the suffering that we've seen other people experience, I don't think that amounts to all that much. But I do think that this is a family that for a long time has been obsessed with the kind of this like family branding thing, the family name, putting it up on institutions. That may stand for something. I think they've lost the good name, and I think that's one thing that they're never going to get back.
No, it's a real shame to see history destroy that. After that, the book is an empire of queens, history of sacrifice. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. We'll wrap things up. So, now as I feel that I'm constantly bringing up late, I think I'm bringing up more and more after the pandemic. This 3 trips, I think, was to Vegas, Georgia conference. This next thing was 2 trips. And over the years, go back and try and find these episodes where I would go to Las Vegas and talk to employers, and there was various different types of lawsuits. One subset of these lawsuits, the argument still took place, was on behalf of counties and municipalities. And suing, they ended up suing the distributors
McKesson is one. Cardinal is major. They had a regulatory obligation to track how many pills were going to any specific missionary country. And they basically split a blind eye on it. And of course, we had places like Western Europe and Ohio, you had millions more pills. Hundreds of pills, thousands of pills per actual resident of the city or the town or the county. Really, just a stunning story. But folks can check that out. I guess that's for us. If you watch on Peacock, we will be back tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. If you are not watching Peacock, oh boy, we have stuff. We will get to that in a moment. I'm going to remind you, because $4 credit is something I know we have its own. But Steve Kravitz smoked that instruments. This is lame. We find it real, common. It's really common. You don't realize that as a performance artist. I mean, you are standing up. It's kind of fun. What we'll talk about that is that we just want to remind people, just coffee, and just coffee.co-op. The coffee co-op is supporting the show for every day of its 11 plus years existence, and they're supporting Breakthrough Live. They are cooperative, they're community supporters, they're coffee back in Madison 2011 at those protests. They are supportive of their producers, Central America, around the world, countries, not abandoned, regardless of seasons and whatnot, we can figure it out. They are celebrating these 11 plus years with us by giving a 25% off. And you get it's MR25, justcoffee.co-op, coupon code MR25, just for this week. Check it out. Good opportunity to taste the very types of coffee. Meanwhile, you can also become a member of this program by going to joinreport.com. We show commercials and it's fun app, and you can support this program and allow us to rely on no one but you. Joinreport.com. Also, don't forget, this show, youtube.com/show or twitch.tv/the_LT_show. Meanwhile, what is happening in Left_media_Matt?
Yeah, and the morning election number tomorrow at 8. Tonight I'm going to do a bunch of history. There's too much basketball going on last season. So just a lot of press after the ballot tape. Tonight I plan to do twitch.tv/Larry over around 11. Check that out, folks. And then we'll have patrons of Left Directly, patreon.com/Left Directly, conversation with Andy Day on socials, school, and Arkansas. About 100 listeners. So, look at that.
That game was boring until it wasn't.
What was that, last night?
Yeah.
Suns Clippers.
Suns Clippers.
Yeah.
And Paul George missed 2 free throws that.
Yeah, but I couldn't help to say that Paul did very well in the first 5 minutes before that. Anyway.
Let's do this before we go to the fun. There was a video that was on it. I can only tell you it involves me and some body lotion oil. First of all, we want to get out ahead of this. Want to get out ahead of this. Know that powder is great for the internet. Something to embarrass me about. There was a time where I was a performance artist and one of some things that I look back on and feel proud of, but understand that in this day and age, that it'll stay. So stick around for this and maybe I'll find out. Anytime, DJ Janarchy's latest masterpiece.
Oh,
And for our folks, 616-579-3920. See you in the fall.
You ready?
Alpha males back. Alpha males
oh, Jesus.
Hello, everyone. My name is.
At the same time, the family, this particular family, I won't make this yet. So, stick around for this and you'll find out. Anytime, DJ Janarchy's latest masterpiece. And for our folks, 616-579-3920. See you in the fall.
Are you ready?
Who said that?
Alpha males back. Alpha males back.
Just as the list is systematic.
The alpha males back. The alpha males back.
Just want to wait the white man.
Alpha males back.
You're out of Batman.
The alpha males back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar, what a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, or come on, put them in rotation.
Well, the government knows that they're like 40.
That's
White people do is try to look worse than normal white people. All white people are stuck.
And the alpha males is like. Stop this, that's why. Stop this, that's why.
Have been trying to do an impression on a college campus.
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the drive can't all agree this. Sight. And the alpha males are back. And the opposites are black. And the alpha males are black. And the opposites are back.
This is Donald Trump out there. Doesn't go to work.
Can't after us. Come on! Big glass room for a clear game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, you boy! I have a talking status. The alpha males are back. Opposites are black. Alpha males are black. Opposites are back. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price. Watch me around here. I am a total person.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. You should probably just get to this and just talk through it right up front. We will get to our phone calls in a bit. ladies and gentlemen, I consider where back in the day, as it were, I was a performer. This video is being unearthed from the show titled Pajama King. Look at that Pajama King. This was a show put on by John Benjamin. Notice John Benjamin and John Blazer in the show. Time I was.
That name seems very John Benjamin. It was actually your guys, the Pajama King.
Yes, that was John Benjamin. About that story on this failed China King show. And at the time, I was into this, and I was what a lot of people do is exploit some of their physicality for money. And I didn't do well, to be honest. It was not the market for this type of performance that one would expect. However, I did perform this professionally for a couple of years. I was in it, didn't do well, but I was recruited to this performance. The midnight champion, I think it was a public conference.
Really gross sounds.
So gross. Yeah. That was my situation at the time. That was my station. And so that was things happening. That was part of that began.
Why do they look like, greased up chickens?
Well, because stuff, and at the time I had chickens implanted into my necks, and so that's why
I mean, it looks like the precursor to the bun implants that we're seeing these days, right? I mean, a little cartoonish.
old school Jordan Boyism will know that the mid-aughts, that was the probably half time after I was riding in life in New York City for 7 years by that point. So in 2004, my paths were extremely developed. It's very easy to roads about what's got this year.
I have another question. Did you shave your legs?
Those got for shape.
Yeah, they are shaved.
Not the entire leg, just the calf area.
Wow, that's what mothers in the 1930s told their daughters. Shave your leg, they'll play below the knee. So I'm glad you had to do all
Or
around.
shave the front side. It was really nice back. You were very committed to our performance back then. So,
Yeah, as revolting as I found that, I do want to say that I haven't seen Chronic in anything quite different. So if you look at Chronic, what else do you want to put up against that? Look at this. So,
and frankly, that's just fast. I think when I began dance, I was probably the same age as you, rather works out. I never really did anything. In fact, I'll also say that John Blazer still to this day, over the past couple of weeks, will send pictures of cows that he's out and about. Really making that
Brandon, you have something to say?
catch on.
the president and the products. Architect were like that with weights. Cold feet.
Yeah.
Probably can't even be aware exactly where they exercise.
Oh no, that dude strikes me as just a upper body day, 6 out of 7 days, and then maybe just try to work on
Good fun.
Sunday.